As landlords, we're asked to negotiate all the time, and the trickiest requests of all come from our tenants. I'm Jen, I have Hold It with PM Jen, and I've been managing properties for over 22 years, thousands of tenants over that time. Let me share with you my top tips. My first tip isn't actually about negotiating at all. It's about having what I call a clean offer. Do not attempt to set a rent that leaves room for negotiation. Set your rent in your advertisements at the market rent. Now that might take some doing on your part to find out what that is, but you ought to do that so you can make what I call a clean offer. A clean offer would also have all the other details about what you're willing to permit. So what type of lease are you looking for? Are you willing to permit animals in the property? What about utilities? Are there things that you're going to include or not include? What sort of maintenance responsibilities like lawn and snow care are the tenant's responsibility? So putting out a clean, descriptive offer is my top tip because that is what you can negotiate from. My second tip, also not about negotiation at all. And you're like, I've been bait and switched here, but we're getting to it. And this is the stuff you really need to know. You need to never negotiate on your underwriting and tenant application process. So you need to have a process wherein tenants can apply to rent your properties, proving their creditworthiness. You get to determine what that process is, as long as it's compliant with the law, and how you make those decisions. Do not negotiate off of this process. This process needs to be consistently applied across all the applications for the property for fair housing purposes and to ensure it works, which is generating you the qualified tenant you want to lease to. So often the requests for negotiation from tenants start with skipping or altering this underwriting and approval process. I'm going to encourage you to never negotiate with that. My first real negotiation tip, and it is around that time when the tenant's applying, before they've even executed a lease on your property. It is common for a prospective tenant to ask for, hey, would you be willing to work on the rent? Hey, I know you said no dogs, but I have a dog. Would you be willing to work with me? Maybe I don't have all of the security deposit money up front. Maybe we can make a payment plan. And those are all fine things to negotiate, but the tip I would give you is not to negotiate or agree to any change in terms from your clear offer until you have the application in hand. And what I would explain to tenants is this: I'm negotiable. I'm open to working with a credit-worthy tenant on a situation that works for both of us. However, before I can agree to those things, I do need to get your application and make sure you're a qualified tenant that we would be issuing a lease offer to anyway. And then we can discuss the particulars. So putting that obstacle in front of them before you get into the negotiation, I think makes sure you're working with, one, people that you want to work with anyway, and two, saves time because now you're not going back and forth with people that you don't even know are qualified yet to begin with. My best tip, I call it don't give without getting. So when we negotiate, when we are working, for instance, in a move-in scenario and a tenant, maybe you've been advertising the rent at $1,500 and they'd like you to rent it to them at $1,400 per month. So we have a qualified tenant, they do meet our application standards, and they're asking for this. Do I just lower my rent in order to get that tenant? Possibly, but not usually. See, the person proceeded to apply and go through all of that while it was $1,500 a month with no promise of lowering that rent. So if you're feeling amenable to that as a landlord investor and you want to meet their requirement of $1,400 a month, what can you get that would possibly make up that $100 a month or $1,200 annual value? Well, potentially you could ask for a longer lease term. Or, maybe instead of 1 year, 2 years, maybe they're making a move in the winter and you'd prefer to see a lease end date in the summer. So maybe an 18-month lease would be in your favor. Now, maybe you want to have a higher security deposit for lower rent. I don't know, maybe that's something you want to mess with. Maybe you were prepared to provide lawn and snow care and it's actually feasible for the tenant to do that in the property that they're renting from you, and you can make that their responsibility in exchange for the lowered rent. So think this through. Maybe they want a pet and you have a no pet policy. Okay, well, maybe there's a pet fee or some sort of extra security deposit that you're willing to accept for that pet. So we always think about when somebody wants something from us and we're negotiating, how do we make this work for both of us? And so I'm not a big fan of seeing landlords just simply give without getting something in the lease or negotiation that makes it more appealing to them. Now, my last tip is to not renegotiate mid-lease unless it is in your best interest also as the landlord. The most common scenario I see landlord investors falling into is they rented to a group of adults, and for whatever reason, those adults, partway through the lease aren't living together anymore. So some of them have left and some of them have remained. And so let's say, for instance, there were 3 adults with $1,500 rent, and 2 of the adults left, leaving 1 behind. It is really common in these scenarios when I meet investor landlords that they share with me, so I've only been getting $500 a month because there's only 1 of them left. And I ask, did you renegotiate the lease? Did you terminate the lease? Did you release those people from the responsibility? So that's the most common scenario. Sometimes tenants will experience financial hardships through a lease or different challenges, and I'll find landlords lowering rent or increasing flexibility, which is their right to do. However, when you're doing these things, do them in writing and attempt to get something that works for you as well. I'm not a fan of renegotiating leases midterm. If you need to renegotiate leases, I think you should do it at their expiration and before you start a new one. However, it is your property. You should do what you want with it. However, my encouragement is to document it thoroughly and make sure any changes that you make to any agreements are documented in writing, signed, and shared with both parties. I hope my tips have made you more confident when it comes to negotiating with your tenant about terms of the lease and the housing arrangement. But if you still need more help, I hope you'll check me out at holditwithpmjen.com and on all the socials. I'm dedicated to bringing you real life education content about how to make more money with your buy and hold residential investments.